Hello and welcome. The assignment this week says pharmaceutical companies shape a significant amount of what counts as medical knowledge, perhaps like the puppeteers in Plato's cave. If we trusted the industry to only report and promote truths, would its ghost management of domains of medical knowledge matter? Why or why not? Here's the outline that I propose. Truth can sometimes be a loose term, as the medical industry shows. Medical truth can be manipulated through ghost management to fit an agenda. Ghost management means it applies itself to two primary domains, induction and deduction. Induction is something about observational sciences. I'll explain that in the tutorial. Pharma companies can manipulate inductive medical findings by controlling research funding, drug trials, etc. I'll explain that in the tutorial. While true, such findings, deduction is derive necessary implications. I'll explain that in the tutorial also. Pharma companies can manipulate medical deduction by shifting focus, something like this. I'll explain that also. While in some senses they are true, their premises can have some effects, some negative effects. In general, the manipulation of medical truths matters because it impedes advances, it impedes agency, there's these externalities. I'll explain all of those things as I go through. And this is, okay, so this is saying why it matters, and then just for why not, why it doesn't matter, you could potentially argue. I won't really go through this in the tutorial, but here's the example. I'll just show it on screen. You can pause if you wanted to do that one. Ghost management is, here's a quote just roughly explaining the idea behind it. For pharmaceutical marketing to work best, it has to look like disinterested, unbiased, impartial medical knowledge. As a result, many of the hands doing the company's marketing work need either to be invisible or to look as though they're doing something else. So here are quotes from the reading about the mechanisms of ghost management. I won't read them. I'll just go through so you can pause if you wanted to put this into your answer. Publication planners, there's key opinion leaders, there's medical education and communication companies, pharmaceutical sales representatives, and patient advocacy organizations. Those are all different ways. Two main avenues to obtain knowledge are, I'm suggesting inductive and deductive inferences, and pharma companies attempt to control both. So here's the inductive way, is kind of like unlocking the map in this metaphor. So if you're playing a game, you kind of walk through and uncover the map. So there's black or dark areas that you uncover as you explore the map. That's basically inductive knowledge gathering. You're finding out new things, and then following this analogy to think about deductive, once you have the map, you derive necessary implications. So the distance, you can find out the distance, and necessarily implied from the map is the distance from point A to point B, something like this. The direction on a map. So Hiroshima is northeast of this other place I can't pronounce. Also, the distance is approximately 200 kilometers. Those are all necessary implications from the map. Once the map is known, you can do this deductive reasoning. Okay, so if we have the premise, the world map is an accurate scaled down representation of the Earth, a necessary implication, so valid logic would say that the distance between Madison and Madrid is roughly the same as Madison and Buenos Aires. But this is the difficulty with deductive reasoning. You can have a false premise. This premise is false. This is a Mercator projection. The distances are not accurate. It's not an accurate scaled down representation of the Earth. So it's a false premise, and that makes the argument unsound, because in reality, Madison to Madrid, 6,700 kilometers, Madison to Buenos Aires, 9,100. So they're not similar distance. Okay. Also, a premise can be unfalsifiable or effectively unfalsifiable. Here's an example. There is no better spice on earth. There's this medieval guy back in the day, and he's saying, oh, there's no better spice on earth. A necessary implication is buying the spice means buying the greatest spice known to man. Now, to make that premise unfalsifiable, he has to be the only one to have traveled to where the spices come from, or he has to be the only one who knows where those spices come from. And he very well knows that there are better spices, that they're actually, these spices I got there are the cheapest spices or something, you know, or the quality degraded on the trip or something. But he's the only one who, if he's the only one who knows it, then effectively it's unfalsifiable. How are the other people gonna falsify this idea? They don't know. They're just so that is what the pharma industry is trying to do. Make an effectively unfalsifiable premise. Okay. If there's a premise, this is the dopest dope, necessary implication, buying this weed means buying the greatest weed known to man. Just kind of joking around. This is from Pineapple Express, but similar principle going on here. Following a deductive medical premise. Okay, so there's the inductive part where you're uncovering the unknown. So illness A exists in a medically significant way. That has to be shown. Illness A is treatable. That has to be shown. And the pharmaceutical industry, as the reading explains, can put their hands into both of these things. They can ghost manage the existence of a medically or the definition of which illnesses are medically significant, which illnesses exist. There's ways to kind of tweak that by ghost management. If you read the reading, you'll find out. Illness A is treatable. That's something that can be manipulated a little bit. Drug X treats illness A, so we need to do studies to find if it treats illness A. Drug X is safe and is most beneficial treatment of illness A. That needs to be studied, and the pharmaceutical industry controls the studies. So that's how, that's one part of this manipulation, so to speak. And then once you have this established, once you have this inductive idea established, now you can have this deductive premise that you start with and say drug X is safe and is the most beneficial treatment for illness A. So now you can establish necessary implications from this premise. Drug X is a safe and most beneficial treatment of illness A is the premise. Now, as necessary implications, you fill out. There's some related to the illness. You should treat the illness. That's a necessary implication. Patients should listen to doctors. Doctors should trust and follow medical journals, key opinion leaders, and so forth. There is some implications about the drug. The drug should be prescribed. Doctors should trust and follow medical journals, key opinion leaders, etc., and patients should listen to doctors. I mean, if it's true that drug X is safe and the most beneficial treatment, then it's a little loose that it's a necessary implication, but it's essentially that's what they're going for here. Illness A is significant and treatable. The necessary implication, it ought to be treated. Drug X is predominantly beneficial, therefore it ought to be prescribed by doctors. So the goal of the pharmaceutical industry, they have this incentive to make their premise effectively unfalsifiable or appear unfalsifiable or behave as an unfalsifiable premise. So this premise, they want to protect that. There's different ways that I'll go through. Ghost managing makes the premise seem natural and unchallengeable. And they want to also shift doctors and medical patients' focus to the necessary implications and away from the premise. That's another way to protect their premise. So there's this medieval spice seller, and this guy coming by, how much, good sir? And then the guy's like, oh, since there's no better spice on earth, $1 million just to sniff it. He can charge. He has a lot. There's a lot of power when you have when you're selling something and you're in control of the verifiability of the premise. There's a lot of control. That's what the pharma industry wants. So here are some ideas about induction, deduction that you can include in your answer. Go through a few. Question, is the illness real or is it about as bad as they claim? To massage or manipulate the inductive data, pharma can. They can ghost manage inductive studies on the illness. They can, to get people to buy into the deductive premise, pharma can ghost manage the definition of the illness in textbooks and the education of doctors on the illness, so the illness's definition looks natural, impartial, or unbiased. So the ghost managing is just, they're paying people, but it can't be traced to them necessarily. That's how they're doing it, kind of secretly, and controlling that way. Is drug X the best current treatment for the illness? To massage the inductive data, pharma can ghost manage the conducting and writing of studies about the drug. funding or withholding funds from drug trials, choosing how to conduct the research to get favorable results. Then to protect the deductive premise, pharma can. So I'm saying pharma, but don't write pharma in your answer, write pharmaceutical industry, something like that. I chose the shortcut. I mean, maybe you could write pharma. I'm not sure. Anyways, I'll leave it to your discretion. Ghost manage the medical conversation. So the drug hype looks natural, impartial, unbiased. They can fund these meetings. They can pay for the key opinion leaders and things like this to deliver the information about the drug. Okay. Purchase any competing tech or drugs from smaller companies so that they protect this, that they have the best current treatment. They can purchase the best current treatment or tech leading to a better current treatment. They can be prepared with a replacement drug when their patent runs out, so they can have a better current treatment, but they don't want to release that until their patent runs out, until they've made as much money as they can. Now they're going to release the new technology, which they've had all along. But if they control it, then it doesn't matter that it exists. It's like the spice trader. If nobody knows any better, then they're in control. Is drug X predominantly beneficial to the user? To massage inductive data, pharma can ghost manage how studies are conducted, which studies are conducted, which studies are discarded. To ensure that the benefits of drug X outweigh risks, they can hire ghostwriters to write up the results with the pharma's interest in mind. Pharma supervisors can advise employees to exclude negative findings from ghostwritten studies. That's page 34, if you want to look that up. And to protect the deductive premise, pharma can ghost manage responses to critics. There's something about pseudo-addiction on page 35 and opiophobia on page 39. And here's some general ideas you could add to your answer. So I just want to talk about Aristotle for a second, just to get an idea of with the danger with deductive premises, another danger with deductive premises. A deductive premise that Aristotle came up with was women are inferior to men, and therefore women cannot be citizens, cannot vote. And why did that premise last longer than it should have? Well, people had something to gain. Men had something to gain from that. So the false premise lasted a while. Slave owners had something to gain. Oh, and also men could control the falsifiability of that by not educating women, by doing different things to, yes, okay, have that effect. Slave owners had much to gain from some people can take orders but can't self-direct, therefore they're natural slaves. That's one of Aristotle's premises and conclusions. So why did that one last? Well, slave owners had something to gain, and also they could manipulate how it appeared. So they could not educate some people, so it seemed like they couldn't self-direct or something like this, so they could control that deductive premise. Now, another deductive premise from Aristotle: eels don't have reproductive organs, therefore eels spontaneously reproduce. And he said from mud was his answer to that. This one, people had little to gain from the eel's reproduction, so there's still much that we don't know about the reproductive process. Possibly, there's a connection there. Okay. So what I want to say is incentives matter. And incentives can impede knowledge or what we come up with. And when you follow the money trail, you can sometimes find out, hey, somebody blocked inquiry in this certain area. Oh, they got a law passed to make sure that they weren't investigated, something like this. There's all these conflicts of interests. Pharma has much to gain from promoting over prescribing. This is in the reading. Pharma can influence prescribing patterns so that doctors are prescribing too much of the medicine, but then pharma is selling more. Pharma has much to gain from optimized profits from their products. They can impede inquiry into alternative or better medical treatments. They have much to gain from marketing their products to appear exceptional. They can fund and thereby control many conversations surrounding the drugs. Pharma can erase traces of the incentives that they have. So ghost management can trick people into believing that the premise from pharma companies is natural or unchallengeable, and that lends it the characteristics of an unfalsifiable premise. So pharmaceutical companies, for pharmaceutical marketing to work best, it has to look disinterested, unbiased, impartial medical knowledge. As a result, many of the hands doing the company's marketing work need either to be invisible or look as though they're doing something else. That's from the reading. Ghost management undermines agency. It's another general problem with it. The agency of physicians is undermined by ghost managed medicine. Physicians' ability to challenge the deductive premise is undermined. Why? Because there are ghost managed people hired by the pharmaceutical industry that maybe it doesn't appear that they're hired, that they have this nefarious motive, and the physician is surrounded by these people, and that can impede their agency, their ability to question what they're being told. Undermining the agency of researchers. The agency of researchers is arguably undermined by ghost managed medicine because important medical pursuits are not or cannot be funded. Pharma can impede research into negative effects of their drugs, things like this. Externalities in economics, that's if there's pollution or some kind of negative effect of your business, you want the public to pay for the cleanup. That's an externality when the public pays for that extra thing. So the cost of public health care from the opiate epidemic, that's an externality. 11 billion around, in the US, and around 2 billion costs for hospital costs. Another externality is the loss of lives or destroyed lives from the opiate epidemic, and there's some figures there. So again, back to the outline, truth can sometimes be a loose term. As the medical industry shows, medical truths can be manipulated through ghost management to fit an agenda. Ghost management means something, talk about that. It applies itself to two primary domains, inductive and induction and deduction. Induction is something about observational sciences, finding the unknown. Pharma companies can manipulate inductive medical findings by controlling research funding, drug trials, things like this. And while true, technically true, such findings, can be misleading, something like this. Deduction is derived necessary implications. So necessary implications from the observational science findings from observational sciences. So there's necessary implications from that. Pharma companies can manipulate medical deduction by, shifting the focus away from the premise, making the premise seem unfalsifiable or have the characteristics, we could say, of unfalsifiability. If people caught on that it was unfalsifiable, then there might be problems. So they want to, okay. Be careful when explaining that. Anyways, while in some senses they are true, their premises can, mislead in some ways. And in general, the manipulation of medical truths matters because, it can impede all these things. There's externalities, something like that. So there's a lot of things you could write about. You could not write about deduction. You could just write about the general stuff. You could just write about induction, deduction. Hopefully I gave you a lot of material. You can write from the opposite view, hopefully still. Hopefully there were some ideas for you that you can use. Here's the example again. And then I'm just going to quickly go through some quotes that you can freeze frame on if you would like. So again, there's demonstrate the illness exists, illness is treatable, drug treats the illness, and drugs benefits outweigh the risks. And then I'll just mention also this extra thing, stopping investigations. Illness exists. Here are some quotes about illness exists and the politics of knowledge surrounding that. Illness is treatable. Here's a quote. Here's a quote about demonstrating that the drug treats the illness and benefits outweigh risk. So funding trials. Here's some quotes about funding trials, funding articles. Focus research attention on profitable drugs that might not be to the public's benefit. Here's some quotes. Demonstrate that drugs benefits outweigh the risks. Prevent negative evidence by funding and ghost managing drug studies. Stop technically inductive investigations, so impeding law enforcement by promoting restrictive legislation. That was in the reading also. And that is all I have for you today. Hopefully that helps you out.